Dear friends, welcome to our celebration of the launch of Jian Ghomeishi's 1982. My name is Arshia Tabrizi, and I'm the Vice President of Persian Circle, which is a presenting sponsor of today's event. Persian Circle is an apolitical and non-religious, non-profit organization founded in 2004 with the goal of organizing events to celebrate and disseminate the culture and achievements of the Iranian-Canadian diaspora here in Canada. We have organized a number of community events since our inception. In 2006, we hosted a very successful tribute dinner to Iranian-Canadian academia, celebrating the over 120 academics teaching in Ontario alone at Ontario universities of Iranian descent. We have also hosted several successful events with Dr. Abbas Milani here in Toronto. He's the Director of Iranian Studies at Stanford University and the author of the recent biography of the Shah. Today, we are here celebrating a unique pioneer in the Iranian-Canadian community, Jian Ghomeishi. I will be introducing Jian in a little bit more depth later on, but it is important to note that to his long list of accomplishments, we now have to add a #1 bestseller of Canadian nonfiction. He debuted. Yeah. And it's even more interesting to note that in its third week since its debut, he's still at #3, and who's ahead of him but Salman Rushdie and the book by the guy who killed bin Laden. So I don't know what Jian's been doing, but it makes me a little bit suspicious. Joking aside, I've had the pleasure of knowing Jian for many years as a friend and was privy to the start of his book project where he was planning writing retreats away from Toronto where he could get away from the crazy day-to-day of his life to focus on writing 1982. So with the release of his book, we at Persian Circle felt it was important for us to gather today and celebrate his book launch, but more importantly, to show that we are proud of him and grateful on this Thanksgiving long weekend, that our highest profile representative to the broader Canadian family is Jian, a person who is articulate, multifaceted, and insightful, as deeply engaged in his one-on-one interviews as he is in the broader Canadian social-cultural landscape, politically aware, and above all, he's doing all this while wearing his Iranian heritage as a badge of honor. Also, I'm delighted to announce that Jian will be donating any extra proceeds from this event to the Paria Trillium Foundation. Thank you, Jian. Now, our program today is further enhanced by the presence of two great stars of the entertainment world, both good friends of Jian. Tara Grami, who will be performing a short piece today, and Maz Jobrani, a comedian extraordinaire, who will be conducting what, I guess, let's say will be a lively Q&A with Jian. The talent on this stage is going to be unbelievable tonight, but I think for me personally, what's really important is that Jian, Maz, and Tara all represent that rare breed of artists who couple success with a sense of broader social responsibility and engagement. Now, in terms of our programming, just to let you know, it's 7:30, so I think by 9 o'clock we should have wrapped up. There will be some time for questions from the audience as well. And at the end, this will be followed by book signings outside with Jian. Now, before I introduce Tara Grami, please allow me a few minutes to thank our sponsors and supporters. Okay. Presenting sponsor, of course, Persian Circle. Gold sponsor, Tabrizi Law. Silver sponsors, Format Development, Banu Restaurant, Task Design, Mandana Motamedi and Steve Tabrizi of Raymax, Hamid Reza Saifi, Marcia, did I pronounce that wrong? Marcia Foods. Bronze sponsor, Tahiri Exchange and Fariba Elahi. Supporters of the event tonight, Paria Trillium Foundation, Tirgan Festival, and Shahram Publication. Also, I would like to thank our volunteers, without whom this event would not be possible. Furuzan, Diana, Sahar, Ali, Samar, Aliyar, Arsalan, and Arya. Please give them a round of applause. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Tara Grami. Tara is a tremendously talented artist who has been shaking up the theater world with her one-man show, Mahmoud, which has garnered several awards, including Best of Toronto Fringe 2012, and called out for outstanding production and outstanding performance by Now magazine. Tara is a graduate of the University of Toronto, where she received an honors Bachelor of Arts degree, drama specialist. Tara has worked with some of Canada's top theater artists, including Ken Gass, Leah Cherniak, Sohail Parsa, and Martha Ross. She's particularly interested in the immigration experience in her artistic endeavors in an attempt to understand better multinational identities. I also want to remind all of you, any of whom may be in California or may have friends in California, that her Mahmoud show is currently playing in LA at the Santa Monica Playhouse from October 12th to 14th in association with the Iranian Alliances Across Borders Conference on the Iranian Diaspora. Now, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Tara Grami.
Hello. Wow. Thank you so much for being here. Before I start, I just want to ask everyone who's Iranian to just put their hands up. That's a lot of Iranians. I'm Iranian too, and one thing about being Iranian is we really hate to turn off our cell phones, right? I hate to do it too. My grandma might call from Iran, you know, Louis Vuitton might call, they might have my purse. So I just want everyone to just take out their phones, reach into your bags, your pockets, take out your phones, lift them over your head. I will too. Okay, everybody got their phone? Everybody, I'm not kidding, guys. I mean, that's okay. And I want you to go on airplane mode if you have an iPhone. I want you to turn it off if you have a BlackBerry. Let's be, you know, different this time. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tara Grami, as Ashtia June very kindly introduced me. My one-woman show, Mahmoud, was a great success this summer, and I'm still touring it all year this year. And Gian has been so kind to me. He came and saw the show, he mentioned it on Q, somehow he managed to get me a manager in Los Angeles, an interview on BBC Persia, and just, you know, 1 million people who came to see the show. So I have a lot to be thankful for to Gian. But I am not here to tell you how wonderful Gian is. I am here to tell you how wonderful I am. And I'm an actor, and being an actor from Toronto, it's every actor from Toronto's dream to be interviewed on Q by Gian. Especially Iranian Canadian actors whose mothers think that they should probably marry Gian. Right? All mothers want their daughters to marry Gian. But you know, I digress. But I'm not nearly important enough to be interviewed on Q. I'm not nearly famous enough. I'm not there yet. But let me tell you a little about my show, okay? I'm going to tell you about my show. So in my show, I play 3 characters. I play an Iranian man named Mahmoud, who was an engineer in Iran and is a cab driver in Toronto. It was a very common story. I play myself at the age of 12. And I play a Spanish man who's in love with an Iranian man. Okay. It's hilarious. It's really funny. You should check it out. So everybody always asks me, how do you do this? How do you act like these characters? And so I'm going to show you. It's really, really simple. All I do is I snap my fingers. Okay? You ready? So.
Hello, my friends. How are you? Nice to see you. Wow. Some very good lookers here tonight. If I'm knowing everybody so good looking, I would be wearing something a little bit nicer.
So that's Mahmoud. Thank you. Okay, I have more.
Hi, I'm Tara, and okay, so everyone's like, wow, you're gonna like meet Jian Ghomeshi, and I'm like, whatever, Jian Ghomeshi is just Iranian, and I hate being Iranian.
You don't need to clap, you're so sweet, okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emanuelos, de mil boneras, testosteronas, and I'm the sexiest Spanish man you've ever seen. Oh my God, are you guys Persian? I could totally tell because everybody's wearing something designer. And you smell like the perfume counter at the bay. Seriously, did you wear too much perfume? Ugh.
That's it. So, since I'm not cool enough or famous enough to be interviewed on Q, I thought these guys might be, right? And I decided to use the power of technology and the magic of theater to make it happen. So we're going to start with Mahmoud.
This is Q. All right. Hi there, I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Nice to have you on the program.
Thank you, Jian-Jean. It is wonderful to be on your program. You know, Jian-Jean, we are so proud of you. You are such a good representative of Iranian. You know, Jian-Jean, in our culture, we are calling you a real Agha. You know what I mean? Agha. Not just that you are a man, but also that you are having class, you are having education, you are having intellectual. You know, you're also very good looking, very handsome. I used to be handsome too. Anyway, you know, I was very surprised you asked me to be on your show. You know, all I did was drive you home, but you're so nice. You asked me to be here. I'm just a taxi driver. But you know what? I wasn't always a taxi driver. I am engineer. Really? I am the best engineer in Iran. I'm the reason why Iran is even having the electricity.
It's hard to imagine the ups and downs.
Yes, I have had many ups and downs, Jian-Jean. It has been very difficult these years. You know, a smuggle out of Iran, many problem, many difficulty, but once upon a time I was engineer. I'm still engineer of my taxi.
Was there a moment when you thought maybe you wouldn't be able to make it?
Yes, there were many moments, Jian-Jean. Many moments. But let's not get serious. I think if we're going to get serious, we should talk about Iran. I think we should tell your listeners what is really Iran. Dear listeners of CBC, Iran is the land of the kings. It is a land of the emperors. It is a birthplace of civilization. I am so sorry, Jian-Jean. Just, it is my wife, just... Hello? Sorry. سلام قربونت برم. چشم عزیزم. باشه. چشم شیرم میخرم. چشم قربونت برم. فدات شم خودم. 500 times a day she's calling me, Jian-Jean. No problem. Where I was? Oh, yes. Iran.
Hi. I guess it's really nice that you're having me on your program, but I didn't really want to be on your program because, to me, you're just an Iranian guy that kind of sounds like a white guy. But, I came here and you're actually kind of really cute for a really hairy Iranian guy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But don't worry, I'm not in love with you, okay? I'm in love with Joe. But Joe's not in love with me. Joe's in love with Nicole Lance, who's blonde and perfect and beautiful. But guess what? Next week's the audition for my school play, and I'm gonna audition, and I'm gonna get the lead part, and Joe's gonna fall madly in love with me, and he's gonna forget all about Nicole Lance. Wanna hear my song? Okay. Stop with all these games. You're driving me insane. Now you're back again and you want more of all these games. You're putting me through so much pain. You're back again and you want more.
Very nicely done. That's a really pretty song.
Thank you. I wrote it myself, music as well as lyrics, and I choreographed the dance myself as well.
Wow. What a song. What a performance. That is a live performance you just heard.
Wow, you are kind of cute. Oh, hello, Jian Ghomeshi. You're really handsome. But not as handsome as my boyfriend. His name is Behnam.
How do you like to describe him as he was in person?
As he was in person, he's still a person. He's so cute. Oh my God, you have no idea. He's very cute and he's very sweet and we're very in love, you know. And he take care of me, I take care of him. Yeah, we just love each other so much, you know.
Where did you guys get to know each other?
Oh, we met at Starbucks. The first time I'm seeing him, he's wearing a Tom Ford suit with Gucci loafers, a Marc Jacobs shirt, and a perfectly folded paisley pochette in his suit pocket. And then he turns to me and he says, "Where did you get that limited edition Hermes satchel? I've had my name on a waiting list for years." And then the barista hands him his grande half fat no foam vanilla chai latte and a venti cup, and I know we're going to be together forever.
That's going to be increasingly hard to do.
Why? No, it's not. Why would it be hard to be together?
5 years from now, what would be the ideal situation?
Well, you know, we'd get married and move to Richmond Hill. And, you know, I'd just be like a typical Spanish Persian house husband. You know? Oh, but, you know, lately he's in Iran right now, Jian, and I haven't heard from him in a while, and he's been acting really different, so I'm actually a little afraid that he's cheating on me.
Do you worry about that?
Yeah, I'm worried about that. What do you mean, are you worried about that? Oh, you're so smart. I guess I shouldn't be worried about that. He's in Iran, and that president guy said there's no gays in Iran. So I have nothing to worry about. Thank you. Thank you so much. So that was a little something about the show and about Jian. And I want to thank you guys again for being here and thank Jian and encourage you all to read the book. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Wow, that was a wonderful performance, Tara. Thank you so much. I wanted to apologize. I mispronounced one of the sponsors' names. His name is Hamid Reza Safipur. So our apologies. So I wonder, Tara, if in what voice you talk to yourself when you're home alone. That must be interesting. As I mentioned, we have one other special guest tonight with us, Maz Jobrani, who's going to be conducting a Q&A with Jian. Let me just do a brief intro of him. For those of you who don't know him, of course, he's a very famous Iranian-born comedian based in California. His body of work includes, of course, the very famous Axis of Evil comedy group. He has had several film roles and appearances on shows like The Colbert Report and various other shows. For those of you who may not know, he actually studied political science at Berkeley, where he received his BA degree. He was enrolled at the PhD program at UCLA when he decided to actually pursue his childhood dream of acting and performing comedy. He has been a cultural ambassador with the Levantine Cultural Center in LA since 2005, and many of you may have had the pleasure of witnessing his act at a couple of the Paria Trillium Gala fundraisers. And now to our, celebrated guest, Jian Ghomeshi. Of course, Jian's accomplishments are too numerous and diverse to list fully, but I'm going to try. Celebrated an award-winning musician, including with the multi-platinum selling folk rock group Moxie Fruvis, producer, manager, published writer in publications such as The Washington Post, The Guardian, The Globe and Mail, and the International Herald Tribune, social activist, and of course, host and co-creator of North America's gold standard in arts and entertainment shows, CBC's national daily talk show, Q. Some of you may not know, but since its inception in 2007, Q has garnered the largest audience of any cultural affairs program in Canada and has become the highest rated show in its morning time slot in CBC history. Q is also now broadcast across the United States and on Public Radio International and on CBC television. In 2012, Jian was awarded the prestigious New York Festival's International Radio Broadcasting Gold Medal for Best Talk Show Host. And in the fall of 2009, Now Magazine named him Best Media Personality in TV or Radio. Now, before I introduce and leave it to Moz and Jian, I just wanted to mention to Jian that I did finish reading his book last week. And we have a lot in common, Jian. When you come out, I'll talk more about it. I loved Spandau Ballet. I first settled in Thornhill, too, when I moved to Canada. And once mistakenly, I tried to sing Roxanne at a karaoke bar on my birthday. But I gotta tell you, that's where it ends. That's where the similarities end. You had cooler hair, funkier style, and all around your 1982 was way more exciting and eventful than mine. And so with that, please welcome me, help me in welcoming Moz Jobrani.
Hello, 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 hello. Hi, hi, hello. Happy Thanksgiving. Keep it going for Arshia one more time. Arshia June for, please, right here. Hi. Where's my Persians? Raise your hands. Okay, I want you to take your cell phones out and turn them on. Because I know that you all paid the phone company and you want to get the most out of your phone right now. Like, Tara June, I like the show, but the phone is not going to turn off, okay? This is... I have an all-weekend plan. I got to use it. I didn't know it was your Thanksgiving. I was not aware. I live in America, and as you know, we don't know anything about the rest of the world. So I did not know it was Thanksgiving, and I didn't even know that Iranians celebrated. What do you eat? Like turkey kebab? What is the... I'm going to have a ghormeh sabzi. We put the turkey in there. It's experimental for this holiday. We have kotlet made out of turkey. And we invite our Turkish friends from Tabriz. They come to the show. We all get together. They do the cooking. We eat. I wanna thank Paria for inviting me to come be a part of this. Mr. Tabrizi. Where is Mr. Tabrizi? Oh, Mr. Tabrizi. Thank you, sir. Mr. Tabrizi, always putting on these great events, and this is a great thing to be a part of. You know, I've known Jian for several years now, and you guys all know him so well. But you know, it's amazing because in our culture, we put so much emphasis on, you know, vakilo doctoro, you know, doctor, lawyer, engineer, which is fine, it's good. But you know, there's other, like what he's doing is amazing, and what he's done with this book is amazing. And please do read the book. You know, don't just buy it and then, you know, the movie will come out. I watch it when the movie. And I know some of you, and the other thing I know is we all have interesting stories. So I know some of you are like, Baba, I could have written a book myself. I'm gonna call it 1983. It's gonna be even better than his. I could write so many books I could write. He sat down and wrote it. I mean, it's amazing because I actually saw him in Los Angeles, and he was staying at a pretty nice hotel, I gotta tell you. And every time I went there, I was like, he's not writing a book. He's at the pool all day. And then it came out, and I read it. I was like, oh my God, what a great book. And it really is. And we all know right now we're in a time in the world where the Middle East is always misrepresented and misconstrued. I mean, it's been like for 40 years, it's been like that. And every day, like with all the protests and stuff, you know, and I don't know if you guys here you get the questions, but I get the questions of people, you know, Moz, what's going on with your people? And I'm like, you mean in Libya? They're like, yeah, your people, and I'm from Iran. They go, well, isn't Libya in Iran? And it's crazy though, because the protests, we all know that it's a small portion of the population, right? But the press, see, that's the problem, is that we need people like Jian doing the book and getting the press, because the press puts that out there and a positive voice is out there to counter the negative voice, because we all know the news, yeah. Because we know the news shows like a group of people protesting, and then everybody thinks that we're all crazy American flag burning, you know, nut jobs who, you know, like, and it was actually funny because it did spread all over the protests. It actually got to Iran, and I don't know if you guys heard about this. The Iranians went to protest against that anti-Muslim film. They went to protest in the streets, and they showed up, and there's no American embassy in Iran. So the protesters were like, that too, which building is it? Which building are we? Which building? Let's go home. Let's talk about it. They actually went, in Iran, they actually went and protested at the Swiss embassy. Did you hear about this? They did. They said, death to Switzerland for being neutral. And the Swiss were like, what's wrong? What did we do? Go home, relax, have some chocolates. Go home. So, we all know that's out there, but someone that's out there countering that voice right now and is on a book tour, and he needs the support as much. I mean, he doesn't need it. He's killing it already. He's one of, the only people that are above him on the list. One of them killed Bin Laden, and the other one's got a fatwa. So, I mean, he's doing all right. But please do support it and read it, and it's a great book and written very funny way. And I want to welcome now so I can interview him. This is gonna be fun because he always interviews people. So I'm gonna get down to the nitty gritty, find out what's really behind this Jian Ghomeshi guy. I think he might be Mexican. I swear to God. We're gonna find out right here. Give it up, please, for Jian Ghomeshi.
Merci, thank you.
بفرما.
خواهش میکنم.
Please. No, please, after. No, please.
خواهش میکنم.
Thank you. Okay, that's the night. Thank you very much. Good night.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, بابا. ما تو ایران
Thanksgiving خودمون دیگه.
آره بابا, it's our Thanksgiving, your Thanksgiving.
By the way, just before anything else, I must say that Maz, I had all these dates booked, and Aghay Tabrizi so kindly and some other folks said, let's do something with the Persian community, and I was very touched by that. And as soon as we called Maz, he said, I'm there. He played in front of 2,000 people last night in Washington, D.C., and then he comes here to do this before he goes to L.A. So thank you, brother. And honestly, I'm sorry, actually, because I feel bad because people are just like, can we just listen to Maz for the next hour? Why do we have to have Jian? But I thank you for doing this, and
please, thank you. Thank you for having me, and I'm excited. I'm going to be honest. I've only gotten through half of the book because I got on Wednesday, and I read very slowly. It took me 1 hour to read the cover. I was like, what's that other number? No, it's
actually my father. My father, one of the first things he said about my parents are here. Hi, making me very nervous. My great parents. I owe everything to my parents. All the problems that I've had, I owe to my parents. And my father, he sent me an email when he had finished the book, because I gave the book to them a good 2 months, 2.5 months ago, well before it was coming out, because I knew that I needed them to get comfortable with some of the things that are in the book. But my mother sent me an email and said, honey, there's some of the things in there I'm not totally comfortable with, but you're a great writer. Congratulations. It was a very sweet note. My father sent me a note, and he didn't say anything about it, but the first paragraph was just, I have read this in 10 days. Normally I read for 3 months. This one, 10 days I have written. I was like, Dad, what do you think of the book? 10 days.
My reading is getting faster.
It is a simple book.
Well, first of all, your storytelling is very funny. You'll enjoy it. And the first question, are you or are you not Mexican? No. No,
What's this Mexican
No,
thing?
I'm just kidding.
You've said it twice, though. I'm starting to wonder.
Because I'm Mexican, so I'm hoping he's Mexican, because it's very good business to be Iranian these days, so I change. No, let me just get right into it. First of all, I wrote some notes in your book. I felt bad writing in your book, and then outside people were asking me to sign your book.
Yeah, I saw that. Some people gave me the book, and it said, thank you, Maz Jobrani.
Yeah.
I was like, I spent a year writing this book.
Yeah.
He doesn't get to sign my book.
I was signing. I was like, give me that book. Okay. It's blood, sweat, and tears for me to write this. No, first of all, I mean, you tell very funny stories, and I had another question I was going to ask, but I'll go because you just mentioned your parents are here. You tell a funny story, an interesting thing about how you describe your parents. You said that your father tends to word, used to, in 1982, would word his phrases in questions. Yes. And your mother would word them in phrase in
Don't do this to my parents. Yeah.
No, it's not a bad thing. It's a nice thing. And no, because it's funny. I actually think that there's an Iranian trait that we like to pose things in questions. And also parents do that a lot too, right? And we all know, like, if you watch an interview that Ahmadinejad does with any interviewer, it's all questions, right? You know, are you the president of Iran? I don't know. Are you the president of Iran? You know what I'm saying?
It's true.
So tell us about being a kid and being faced with these questions that your dad.
Well, I'll intersperse a couple of things.
Yeah.
But at first I'll say about my father is he's engineer, mohandes, and so it was a disaster from the age of 10, basically, because they started to understand that I'm not going to be an engineer, and then the doctor thing started to go out the window too, and they were hanging on to the idea of lawyer maybe. حالا ممکنه حالا lawyer باشه دیگه. And then that was also a problem, you know. And you know how Iranians are, like they'll, my aunt is always trying to like set me up with girls and stuff, and she'll be like, 21 سالشه پزشکم هست. And you just kind of go, how did she become 21? But they're always, anyway, my father's quite now, and my father's, I think part of the fact that I'm as ambitious and I want to, you know, his mantra is anything that I do, he says, that is great. Please work harder, right? So whatever anything I've accomplished in my life at all never feels like any type of success, because my father will always say, please work harder. And, you know, I told this story for the New York Times this summer about how my father had said once about, it was like 9 or 10 years ago when I was first with CBC. In the second season, I got my contract renewed, and sorry, Dad, I got to tell this story, but and I, you know, we don't want to talk about money, you know, in Iranians, we're not gonna, and so I'm not gonna tell anybody, but I thought for my parents, the one people I could say, you know, I could call my dad, he'd be proud of me. So I called him. I remember I was in my kitchen and I called him in the morning and said, Dad, you know, and it had been a long negotiation with my agent. And I said, Dad, you know, we've cut a deal. I was doing a TV show at the time. I cut a deal, and, you know, my agent has been very strong with them, and this is how much I'm going to be making now. You know, this is my new salary. And my father said, that is great. But, you know, Larry King, he is making $60 million a year. I was like, Larry King, Dad. First of all, he's 75 years old. Second of all, he's, you know, but, and so fast forward to, now you think this is an old story, like fast forward to 2.5, 3 weeks ago, I had this big launch party for the book in Toronto. It was amazing. It was a lot of friends, but, you know, some politicians and celebrities, and all these people came, and I was very touched. There was about 1,000 people there. It's a great party. And my parents came, and you know, my parents are the stars of the book. The book is dedicated to my parents. So a lot of the people are saying, oh, and saying hello to them, and there's a band playing, and there's drinks, and there's 1,000 people, and in this corner, there's one area where they're also selling the book, right? So people who are there, if they haven't bought the book in the store, or they have a chance, they could buy it at the launch party. So as my parents are leaving at the party, and you know, there's all this celebration, and it's just been this lovely event. I was so touched. I said, Mom, thank you for coming. And she said, oh, Junam, kheli ali bude. And I said, Dad, I'm so glad that you were here. And my dad said, how many books we have sold? I was like, Dad, no, it's a party. People are enjoying. Look, how many books we have sold? کتاب نخریدن. چیه؟
He's like, stop talking to us. Go sell.
So I had said, so my book debuts at #1 in Canada, and I called my parents and #1. That is great, but it is 1 week now. Yes, maybe not next week, and then it dropped anyway. My parents are they have been incredibly supportive. And yes, there is a. I could read a little bit of that.
I would love to. I'd love, and also the other thing I got to tell you was what's beautiful about your book is, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is it's not just an Iranian or a Middle East. I think we all have these experiences with our parents. You know, so it's this. How old were you at this point?
See, the book is about me being 14,
right,
and desperately trying to be David Bowie because we had. Yes, it was very funny. It's ridiculous, but we had just moved to Thornhill, and what people need to understand is, and I explained it early in the book, Thornhill is not the way Thornhill. It's not like that. It was not like that at all when we first moved to Canada. It was very homogenous and white and conservative. And when we moved there, we were the ethnic family on the street. There were no other Iranians around, I assure you. And so that was very difficult for me. And then, of course, the revolution happens. And so there's all kinds of... so it's against the backdrop of that the book is kind of a funny story, true story of me thinking that if I can be like David Bowie, this famous pop star, English pop star, then people will like me. And being in love with this older woman, Wendy, who's 16 years old, and who reminds me of Bowie. There's some sexual confusion too, and so if I could be with, she'll like me if I'm more like Bowie. And of course, so I'm trying to be what they call new wave, and this comes as a great source of consternation to my parents who don't understand why I need to be dressing in used clothing and black pointy boots and eyeliner.
Yeah, they say we آبرو داریم. We have a name, like please don't ruin the name, please. So yeah, I would love to if you don't mind.
I can read other parts because we've sort of explained that part. Or do you want me to read?
Well, okay. I'll tell you what. If we're gonna read from, because there's a few parts that I thought would one part. There's one part in the story where and maybe just read from it is so you're 14. You're calling Wendy to try and ask her out on a date, correct?
Yeah. Well, what's happened is I'm so in love with this Wendy girl. Who I've never had a conversation with all year in grade 9 because she's cool and she's older and she's like Bowie, and so I work up the courage finally at the end of the year. There's a big concert that's going to happen in the summer of 1982 called the Police Picnic. The band called the Police playing at this big concert at the CNE Grandstand, and so I work up the courage to ask Wendy out, and she agrees. And so this is like this amazing, possibility for me that I'm going to get to go on a date with Wendy to this concert. And so then you're talking about the part where after I've asked her out, I need to get in touch with her by phone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Trying to make a phone call in 1982. Let me get you this mic stand here, and you could do it. Because I think a lot of people here will relate to this.
Right, so this is, part of the book is just about how much things have changed in the... Merci.
چای بیارم. Do we have any tea, please? Tea.
Yeah, so this is about how much things have changed in terms of trying to get in touch with somebody that you like when you're a kid in 1982. And this is specifically, I'm trying to get in touch with Wendy. As the weekend of the concert approached in early August, I did a lot of planning for what I was going to wear. Remember, I dress all in black and I have my hair spiked and I'm trying to be new wave and punk so that people will like me and Wendy will like me. It was a month since I'd asked Wendy to go, but I called her once in July to confirm that she was coming. To tell you I called her might sound like an innocuous bit of information, but it isn't. Calling Wendy was no simple task. These kinds of phone calls were not easy in 1982. We didn't have text messages or Facebook or IMing or DMing or BBMing in the 80s. Communicating with someone you liked involved high-stakes exposure and risk. To get in touch with Wendy, I had to call her house. This left me vulnerable on all fronts, to the other residents of her house and to anyone at my house who might hear me. The chances of being discovered, judged, or ridiculed were massive. We didn't have mobile phones in 1982. You probably guessed that. But we also didn't have any kind of cordless phones at all. Not yet, not in my house. In other words, telephone receivers were attached to wires that went into a box with a dial pad on it, and that box had wires that came out of it and went directly into the wall underneath the box. The wire that was attached to the telephone receiver was called a phone cord. That's right, phone cord. If you're a teenager today, you might not have ever seen those two words together, but I can assure you that these phone cords once existed. Almost all phones had phone cords in 1982. These cords were usually curly. I'm not sure why. Perhaps they were curly so that when people were on the phone, they could try to uncurl the phone cord as a game during the boring parts of the conversation. That's what people did. But the point is, the phone cord meant that you couldn't make a call or answer one just anywhere you wanted. You had to be near the phone box that the phone cord was attached to in order to speak on the telephone. By the 1990s, even before everyone had mobiles, many families had multiple telephones in their house or a cordless phone or two that they shared. So by the 90s, when there was an incoming phone call, people began saying things like, "I'll get it. I'll take it downstairs in the family room, Dad." But this wasn't possible in my house in 1982. You spoke where the phones were. At our house, we had two primary phones attached to the wall. One was in the main hallway at the top of the stairs. The other was in the hallway at the bottom of the stairs. Both were in the middle of the house, so everyone could hear every phone call that was being made. Both had curly phone cords. I knew I had to call Wendy to confirm our date at the police picnic, to maintain a semblance of privacy when speaking to my dream Bowie girl, and to minimize my exposure and embarrassment. I had to be careful. I had to time my phone call just right so that no snoops in my house heard me, and so that Wendy would be at home and available to take my call. This was nearly impossible to do. We didn't send messages to make appointments for phone calls in the early 80s. The phone call was the message. And also, most people didn't have answering machines, and there was no such thing as voicemail. So if the intended target of your phone call was not home or unavailable, messages had to be communicated directly through humans. This was terrifying and fraught with potential pitfalls. The objective was to find the perfect sweet spot when various factors in play would lead me straight to speaking with Wendy, a goal that would prove too difficult to meet. The first time I tried Wendy, things ended fast. It was in mid-July, and I had waited for an afternoon when no one was home and I could use our upstairs phone. A woman that sounded like Wendy's mother answered. I panicked. I did the instinctive thing to do when the mother of a girl you're infatuated with picks up the phone. I hung up. Fortunately, there was no caller ID on phones in 1982 either, so you could hang up with someone with impunity, complete discretion. Wendy's mother probably thought it was some hooligan playing games. She would never know it was me, and this was no game. The second time I called, the next day, I crossed my fingers and prayed that Wendy would answer the phone herself. On this occasion, thankfully, it was not her mother's voice at the end of the line. Instead, it was her older brother, Paul, who picked up. I decided not to hang up. Bowie would not have hung up. He probably wouldn't be intimidated. Besides, Paul was Gilles' friend. Gilles' my sister. He was nice, and I thought maybe he was an easier conduit to Wendy. It turned out he wasn't necessarily intent on making things so simple either. "Hello?" he answered with his older guy voice. "Hello?" he answered with his older guy voice. Paul was 3 years older than me. He was my sister's age, and he often wore a silver gray vest over a white shirt at school. He had chest hair that you could see peeking out from the top of the shirt that was underneath the silver gray vest. The chest hair was an indication that Paul was older. Also, his shirt had puffy sleeves, the way the pirates have those flowing sleeves. Pirate-type white shirts were worn by two kinds of people in the early 80s. Pirates and theater students. Paul was not a pirate. He was quite theatrical. He dressed like Adam Ant. He also wore form-fitting black pants and boots. He was cool. Of course, he was Wendy's brother, so only made sense he was cool. I cleared my throat and tried to sound very mature as I started to speak to Paul while I fiddled with the curly cord on our phone. Hi, Paul. This is Gian. I'm Gilles' brother from school. You might remember we've met. And, well, anyways, I was wondering if... Yeah. Paul didn't even let me finish. He was laughing. She's here. I suppose my affections for Wendy were more transparent than I thought. Paul had somehow discovered I was smitten with his sister. Maybe he'd figured out this independently because he was wiser and older and wearing a pirate shirt. Or maybe Wendy had told her family about the police picnic. Maybe they had laughed about it over Sunday family dinner. Maybe they were laughing at me right now. I could hear Paul chuckling as he put down the receiver and called Wendy's name. I was convinced I heard a tone in his voice that suggested he knew I was taking his sister to a concert, and that he knew she was 2 years older than me, and that he knew she was like Bowie and out of my league. After what seemed like ages, Wendy came on the phone. I was worried that she might cancel on me. Maybe she had only agreed to come to the concert with me as a joke. Maybe she never meant it. Or maybe she had forgotten about our impending date and made other plans for August. I still had my fingers crossed while holding the phone when Wendy began speaking. Then, with one opening line, she made it all okay. Hi, Gian. The police picnic is going to be rad. Thank you.
So I love that segment again. You realize it's not just about being it's not just about your ethnicity. It's something we all relate to with the phones. And it was did your parents used to call Iran and yell back in the day?
Yes, yes. Whenever it's long distance, you have to yell.
You have to yell,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We used to, because those phones, you forget, because you know now it goes so fast. You get the iPhone 4, it's iPhone 5, iPhone 6. It's just every year.
Yeah.
You forget. You
But
know?
don't you notice that people like our parents who used to, because the phone calls used to be crackly, I guess they had to scream loud. Have you noticed that they still do that?
They still yell. Yeah.
Like even if the guy's down the street.
Yeah.
You know, it'll be like, Pasco Jaito!
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Well,
right?
did you guys, you know, the cord, you forget about the corded phone, and I don't know if you guys used to do this, like Persian New Year, we used to, like, somebody would call the relatives, and then you would have to get on the phone, like aunts and uncles, you don't know who they are, you know, like you know, hello, you know, right? Those corded phones, man. And that, you're right, playing with the thing the whole time. I was
Salam, auntie. You don't really know them that well.
Well, I was nervous for you as I was reading this, because I remember, you know, if you had to call, you're right, you had to make sure nobody's home, and then if the wrong person picks it up.
Well, part of the subtext of it, like what I'm joking, I mean, sort of jokingly trying to make a point that part of it is, and I talk about this sometimes on my program. You know, we love the immediacy of what all this stuff has given us. Everything is much easier to consume, much faster, and the world is much faster. It used to be, I joke about this in the book too, it used to be things that are bigger are better, you know? Now it's things that are faster are better. Speed is the currency. Everyone wants speed. And this has implications for culturally for us on a number of different levels, including interpersonally. Like, part of the point I'm trying to make here is when you have to work that hard to get to speak to a girl in grade 9 that you're interested in, you might have an investment in that relationship that might be different than if I see her on the first day of grade 9 and I friend her on Facebook, which is what you can do now. In the same way as there's this part of the book where I talk about how it took about 3.5 hours to buy an album. You know, when I wanted to buy a new record because I was so interested in music, I would have to get on the I lived in Thornhill, obviously, so I'd have to get on the Markham Transit or Thornhill Transit, go to Finch Subway, get on Finch Subway, get on the subway, go down to Yonge and Dundas, get out there, go to Sam the Record Man, go into Sam the Record Man, try to be cool so you can't ask for help, find the record, go to the counter, pay for it, get it in a bag, go back on the subway, unwrap the cellophane and look at it as you're on the subway, get back on the bus. By the time you get home and you were ready to put the needle on the record or put it in your CD player, by the mid-'80s, the CDs you'd invested 3 hours of your time. And so I'm arguing that maybe your relationship with the music, again, in this case, is going to be somehow different or even more profound than if now where you sort of go, oh, I like that song, I'll press a button, now I own it. Maybe I'll listen to it a couple times and now it's in my digital library. Our relationships have changed. It's not to say that technology is a bad thing, but in a way, given that it was a more innocent time. By the way, this has always been what people do, right? As you get older, generations go, oh, back then we used to have to walk to, you know, we woke up in the morning and we cleaned the lake, you know, like that kind of thing. And it was, we had real relationships, and we're just getting to the age, it's part of what this book is about, where we're writing our story for the first time about the 80s, and it wasn't really that long ago, but it's so profoundly long ago, given that all of our modes of communication, all of the things that we are part of our normal life now, whether it's Google or YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or iPods or any of our mobile phones, none of those existed when we were growing up. None of them.
Yeah,
right?
and it's interesting you say that because all this stuff with speed was supposed to create more time for us, but it feels like you have less time now. We're all like this, as opposed to what you said. You appreciated things a lot more. Quick question is, just as somebody who I'm curious about writing the book. Was this something that you said I want to write a book, or was it that your agents and stuff were like, hey, you got a radio show, you should write a book? Like, how did this even come about?
Well, I had some interest from, based on the different things I've done, I guess, from some publishers in Canada to write a book, some sort of memoir. And I'd always said no, I was not interested. And this very clearly, I mean, in some of the interviews I've done and stuff, they call it my life story or a memoir. It's not really that. I mean, it's really about, it's a story and storytelling about 1 year in particular. So I really, I just didn't feel like, first of all, it was the right time for me to write what they call it a womb to tomb memoir. So you're born, and then this happens, and then you get a job, and now I'm at CBC, and now I'm in the final part of my life. That's what, a traditional memoir. And I didn't feel like that was something that felt right to me at this time. But I also wanted to do something creative. I get my energy from being creative. What I'm doing on my program each day excites me because it's creative, because I'm learning and I'm trying to create. And that's always been the case with music or writing a column in the newspaper or all of those things. So when it dawned on me that, so I knew I wanted to tell some stories. And when I realized that those stories, the first couple that I started writing, were centered around this time of being 14, then I got the idea of the book could all take place in 1 year. And the book is, on a superficial level, is about me as you work through it takes place in 1 year, and it's true, that me and Wendy and Bowie. But I wanted it to be entertaining. Like, I kept, you're right, I saw you in LA as I was writing the book, and I would get up early in the morning, and I would write all day, and I would keep the stuff that would make me laugh. And it was important for me that, I'm getting a lot of feedback now from people who think the book is funny, and that's important because I knew that I didn't want the subtext or the real story of the book, without being too melodramatic about it, is feeling like an outsider. The real story of the book is about being a first-generation immigrant, transplanted in a new place, in grade 9, trying to figure out where to fit in and not really feeling you fit in. But I didn't want to write an earnest story about how difficult it was to be Iranian Canadian. But I thought if I could write something funny that makes some of those points, it would have the kind of effect that you talked about in your very kind introduction, where you say we have to start to counter ideas about ourselves. And I think, like a lot of the work you do, I think is really, really important for the Iranian Canadian, for the Iranian community in general, in the diaspora, because you're not just earnestly getting up and instead of just appearing on political shows or writing an academic book about how Iranians really are nice people, we swear, you get up and tell jokes, and implicitly, people know that this guy, if this guy's Iranian, then Iranians must be cool, and that's a great service that you do, and.
Bring some tea. No.
And so similarly, that was one of the intents of the book too, to, in an entertaining way, tell some poignant stories. The funny thing is a friend of mine said to me, wow, there's some really hard stuff in there. And I said, yeah, but it's funny. And he said, well, it wasn't really funny at the time. There's some moments that we had difficulty when we were first here, and we can be honest about it, being Iranian, and my dad is this great man who's this great engineer and one of the greatest people the life of the party when he was in Iran. And he comes here and he's got this heavy accent, and people start making assumptions about him and who he is and his intelligence and all the things that we know in this room, because they don't know much about Iranians, and they just assume a guy with an accent is less intelligent somehow than a guy without an accent, right?
Well, you know what's interesting is, and for those of you, as you read it, you'll see a lot of us had similar experiences. A lot of people coming from a different country have similar experiences, but then Iranians in particular, because we came here to get away from what was going on, and then suddenly the revolution turned, and then people thought, people started attacking us. And it's interesting because you say at some point, you said you felt like you didn't quite fit in there. You didn't quite fit in. Like you felt like an outsider and everywhere. And as a matter of fact, it was actually interesting to me. There was a guy, what was his name? Jim Mueller? What was his name? The bully on the hockey team?
Jim Muffin, yeah.
Wait, is that his real name, Jim
No.
Muffin? Oh, okay. So
anybody who is really cruel to me, I've changed their names because I didn't want it to be about attacking those people. They know who they are,
right?
But so I left their names.
Was his name Jim by any chance? And I'll tell you the reason why. Was it Jim? No, I got a reason. Was it Jim at all?
It may have been.
I'll tell you why. Because I actually, when I was in the 4th grade, I had a guy named Jim Javonin who bullied me. And so I'm reading your book, and your guy was Jim. And I was like, what's up with the Jims? Like, why do Jims hate Iranians so much? But no, it's an interesting story because you know what it is it's like you said, it's a funny story. It's about, a lot of your stuff is based in music of that time, and you and I were talking about how I honestly think there's a one-man show or a movie or something around this, which, by the way, the other thing that I would love to have seen is some pictures, because you talk about being 12 or something and your nose being your whole face, basically. We've all gone through it. Iranian men, we know your nose grows, the rest of your face doesn't. You're like Mr. Potato Head walking around the house, right? I want to see that picture.
It's so true. Like, honestly, my nose grew to the size it is now before the rest of my body grew. Like, so that I would enter a room and people would see my nose first.
Here comes Gian.
Yeah.
The nose.
There's actually a picture, there's one picture in a yearbook that was like cut off, and like there's a couple of girls talking or something, and it's just my nose. Like the photo is cut off so you can't see the rest of me, but my nose made it into the shot. But it's absolutely true that part of the problem, and I do think that this is a common experience for some people in this room, but I also think that circumstances change, right? There is a wonderful Iranian community now in and around Thornhill. So if someone were to emigrate here now, there's a bit of a support system that didn't exist. We've got an MPP. That was, I talk about in the book, being 12 years old and thinking it would be impossible for me to ever run for politics or be in the media because my name was too weird and I had a funny background and my nose but part of that first generation experience is not that you don't fit in here. It's, as you say, you don't fit in anywhere. Because when I was 14, I knew that if you threw me on the streets of Mashhad or something, or Tabriz, I wouldn't fit in there. But I knew that here I was somehow different as well. And the greatest thing about this book is hearing from like a 29-year-old woman Chinese woman in Montreal who says, that's my story. I get it, because it does generalize, right? And North America is an immigrant continent, right?
That's what I'm saying. It's amazing when you tell your story, how many people relate to it. And it's beautiful that you did that, and like I said, I encourage everyone to read it, and it's funny, but I was sitting there a lot of times, like, oh my God, that happened, and as a matter of fact, I'd like you, if you don't mind, to maybe read a little bit from the part when the revolution happens, because I think a lot of people here will relate to some of that stuff and how we started feeling about ourselves and the world. Okay. Yeah? I might have a talk show in the future. Look at this. I'm pretty good, huh? And now we're going to hear from Gian Ghomeshi. Thank you.
You're not that good.
He's like, yeah, good luck, buddy.
Okay, so this is a part, it's both heartwarming and nerve-wracking reading this part to you guys, because for all the Persians in the room, some of this you'll understand or be offended by. But this is now, I'm talking about, I've grown up, we've come here, and this is my difficult relationship with being Iranian when right around the time of the revolution. And this is the only other reading I'll do. Sorry if this is too long. By the time I entered grade 9 at Thornley Secondary School in the fall of 1981, I had become resentful of my Iranian background. It was all very annoying. Other kids in Thornhill had families that had been in Canada for generations. Their parents didn't have accents or weird rituals. Besides, there were no Iranian New Wave role models. Being Iranian was a liability if you wanted to be New Wave. Can you imagine the members of Duran Duran being Iranian? No, you can't. You can't because they wouldn't have been. Not in the 80s. They were all white and had perfect noses and straight hair. If the members of Duran Duran had been Iranian, they would have looked less out of place when they made exotic videos like the one for Hungry Like the Wolf in 1982. The premise for that video was that the members of Duran Duran were white English guys stuck in a foreign land. In fact, they were so emphatic about their bleached Caucasian appearance that the keyboard player of Duran Duran wore white makeup to look even whiter. That meant he didn't look very Persian. Besides, Bowie wasn't Iranian, neither was Wendy, and neither was Sting or Stuart Copeland or any of my heroes. And movie stars looked like Robert Redford or Clint Eastwood, not like me. My aspiration became the denial of my ancestry. I was just doing what I needed to do to survive. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't forego our Persian traditions or value or my mother's cooking. Not behind closed doors. A significant proportion of my body already consisted of basmati rice and saffron by the 1980s. I couldn't just give that up. And I loved my family. I wanted to respect our roots. But I didn't like the public baggage that came with being a Middle Eastern. It had never been easy to explain our culture to those who knew nothing about Persians. Then, after the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran had gone from being somewhat glamorous curiosity for Westerners to being seen as an evil enemy of everything from capitalism to civility to rock music to America. Clearly, the regime was despicable, but the line grew too blurred between the way Westerners saw the oppressive new Iranian theocracy and the generalizations they would then make about Persian people. We were all tainted. The proud history of Iranian creativity and culture was ignored. There was little information about the legacy of ideas and technology and poetry and dance that had spawned in Persia. To the West, Iranians were summed up in one big dangerous stereotype. People assumed we were all hairy and angry like the Ayatollahs they saw on TV. It wasn't until I was in university and a racist film called Not Without My Daughter received wide theatrical release that I would decide to take action. In this Sally Field movie, the caricature of all Iranians as barbarians is so ridiculous it would be laughable if it weren't so offensive. Yet there was no outcry at the time, because the Persian community in North America was too small and too timid to speak out. That was 1991. It was only then that I truly realized I took pride in my Iranian heritage and should not succumb to stereotypes about us. At that point, I became very public in accepting my background. I wrote an editorial about the film and the negative depiction of Iranians for the York University newspaper, Excalibur, and I didn't shy away from my identity during my campaign to become president of the Student Federation at York that year. By then, I was an activist. By then, I had some confidence, and I would never forgive Sally Field. But that was after the 1980s. That was after many years of hiding in the cultural closet. Before 1979, things had been much better for the few of us of Persian background that had immigrated to Canada. Even if I was ethnic, I was seen as more exotic than terrorist. I only had to deal with people like Annie McMillan on our street in Thornhill who wondered if we ate Arab food. Annie didn't mean to offend. Besides, she wore tight jeans, and she looked like Christy McNichol. She had a nice tan. Most people just didn't know much about Iran. And when they did, Persians generally had a good reputation. Iran had been, after all, a staunch ally of the West. In the late 1970s, when I was a little kid in grade 5, I'd seen pictures in a newspaper of Farrah Fawcett and Colonel Steve Austin visiting Iran. Do you remember this? They were a glamorous Hollywood couple. I took the newspaper clipping from the Henderson Avenue Public School Library and brought it home to show my parents. Steve Austin was the star of a TV show called The $6 Million Man. He was a real action hero. Well, actually, he had bionic limbs. That made him even better than a real action hero. And it was a triumphant moment for many Iranian kids when he visited Iran with his beautiful wife from Charlie's Angels. Everybody thought Farrah Fawcett was sexy, and she had layered blondish hair that flowed high from her head, and she wore bikinis. Colonel Steve Austin and Farrah Fawcett were on their second honeymoon, and they spent it in Tehran. They were so in love, they needed 2 honeymoons. Everyone talked about how they chose to go to the Middle East, a Middle Eastern country, to express their love. Iran was considered a modern and exciting foreign place to travel to. Apparently, the Shah's son was a fan of the $6 Million Man, and he had convinced his father to invite the couple to visit. The actor who played Colonel Steve Austin was actually called Lee Majors, but that seemed like a silly name to use when you could be called the $6 Million Man and you had bionic powers. It was clear that Colonel Steve Austin thought Iran was cool. I remember being proud of my background that day with the newspaper clipping, even if we were different from the white families on our street. But all this changed after the revolution in 1979. In the months after the Shah was ousted, fundamentalist Iranian students took 52 innocent American workers hostage, and an old bearded guy wearing a turban named Ayatollah Khomeini consolidated power with some other bearded guys wearing turbans. You probably remember this if you were alive at the time. It was big news, and in this case, being bearded really did mean you were scary. Khomeini always looked stern and angry. He wasn't like my Persian uncles, who were very sweet and generous and had big, friendly personalities. Khomeini was fierce, and he sat on the floor eating and meeting and talking and making revolutionary statements and looking even fiercer. He was always sitting on the floor, that Khomeini. I was never really clear why Muslims were no longer supposed to use chairs. Chairs seemed like too practical an item to suddenly dismiss in the name of religion. Why couldn't we be Muslim while sitting on chairs? But Khomeini sat on the floor. I assumed that chairs had become an example of the excessive materialism of the West. And Khomeini soon said that contemporary music and university and any kind of modernism were all anti-Islamic too. He was the symbol of the new Iran. My father originally had held high hopes for the 1979 Iranian Revolution. He even supported it in the first few weeks, along with workers and women and students and others. It began as a popular revolution that inspired Iranians of all walks of life. My father had previously opposed the Shah when he was excessive with his iron-fisted regime, but the revolution had turned out the revolution hadn't turned out the way liberal nationalists like my father expected. Now he would simply shake his head with dismay each night as we watched the evening news from Tehran on CBC. The whole world is now thinking we are savage, my father would say. I don't know why this must happen like this. It is honestly terrible. It was all very sad. My father grew bitter about the plight of his former homeland. He was outraged by that the new regime was executing democratic activists in the name of Islam. But beyond the emotions we experienced inside our home, there were implications for us too. After the revolution, I was consistently reminded that my ancestry was somehow problematic and that North Americans didn't seem to like Iranians very much. At the home hardware store, there was the guy in the baseball cap behind the counter who accused my father of wanting to eat squirrels. And on the radio, there was a new version of the old Beach Boys song, Barbara Ann, with the lyrics changed to Bomb Iran. That was supposed to be funny, but it didn't feel funny, not with my relatives still living in Tehran. None of my extended family in Iran had long beards or religious robes or any kind of relationship with the new regime, but people seemed to want to bomb them. And by the time I was at Woodland Junior High, kids at school were starting to make jokes about me being a terrorist. They would ask where I was hiding my turban and my machine gun. I wondered what a turban would feel like on my head if I ever got to wear one. I wondered if hair gel would be necessary if I were to regularly wear a turban. Bowie would end up wearing a turban in his video for Blue Jean a few years later, but he never looked like Khomeini. His turban was more bohemian than Islamic Republic, and anyway, that video would not come out till 1984. Of course, even before the revolution, I'd been well aware that I had a different lineage than most other kids in Thornhill, but I didn't really understand the implications or the significance of coming from a Muslim family or having our background. My parents had brought up my sister and me to be quite assimilated in the hopes that we would avoid any difficulty of being singled out. But this only meant I knew less about who or what our ancestry was. I certainly didn't know much about organized faith or the way the world was divided along religious lines. My parents had told me we were Muslim. I knew that part, but I wasn't always sure what it meant. I knew my father prayed a few times a day. Sometimes I watched as he prayed, and I tried to figure out what he was saying in a whispered tone. And I knew that when we went on long trips, my mother would make us kiss the Quran before we left. But that was pretty much it. That's what I'd learned about being Muslim. We never visited a mosque or engaged in any other religious activities. We simply weren't a very observant family when it came to religion. In fact, we celebrated Christmas and Easter, and I'd learned to say the Lord's Prayer at school in England. That was the one prayer I had memorized, and it was a Christian one. Later on in high school, most of my closest friends would be Jews. I just had no idea how separated we were all supposed to be. So, are you okay? Can I continue here? Okay. Sometimes my ignorance of what he is saying, Jimmy Gain, sometimes my ignorance of religion led to some unfortunate confusion. I don't know if maybe I don't want to read this one. I'm getting, okay, I'll go through this part. It gets to the end here. Sometimes my ignorance of religion led to some unfortunate confusion. In grade 5 at Henderson Avenue Public School, Kim Coughlin approached me one afternoon at the end of class with a very serious look on her face. Kim Coughlin had long brown hair and rosy cheeks and was very pretty and a good soccer player. I liked Kim Coughlin, but I never felt like I could talk to her. I was too afraid that she might laugh and that I wouldn't know what she was laughing at me or not. She was too pretty. When you're that pretty, you get to laugh at people. And she seemed to laugh a lot, and she was usually surrounded by her adoring fans. But on this day, Kim had a very serious look on her face. She was wearing a sweatshirt with a hood when she walked up to me after class. Her cheeks were rosy. There was little in the way of introduction. She just launched right into her query. Hi, so I have a question. Are you Protestant? The request landed like a thud on my head. It sounded very important, and I desperately wanted to answer correctly. Kim Coughlin had obviously noticed me and felt the pressing need to sort out some crucial details about my character. I wanted Kim Coughlin to like me. I would have done anything to fit in, but I had no idea what Protestant was. It sounded like an attitude or a physical disposition or a cheese. I had no idea. I realized I had a 50-50 chance of answering this unexpected quiz correctly. No, I answered. I'm not. I waited for the verdict. I made sure not to repeat Protestant in my reply to Kim Coughlin. I was still sounding the word out in my head, and I wasn't even sure how to say it. Oh, okay, Kim Coughlin replied enthusiastically. Good. Kim Coughlin then skipped away to join her friend who was waiting for her by the classroom door. It seemed I had done well. Mind you, it didn't mean that Kim Coughlin would spend much more time with me for the rest of grade 5, but she had nodded and laughed warmly, as if my reply had been the acceptable one. I watched her immediately recount the response to the girl who had been waiting. They looked at me and smiled. It would be years later until I properly understood what Protestant meant. Until then, I just knew I had answered the question correctly. And whatever it was, I knew I didn't want to be Protestant. Kim Coughlin didn't want me to be Protestant. Then again, by 1980, most people could guess I wasn't Protestant. Even Kim Coughlin wouldn't have asked me that question by grade 7. I had a Middle Eastern look. And now everyone was curious about my ethnicity, especially with the world events the way they were. Maybe it had to do with the size of my nose. My issues were compounded by the size of my nose as I hit my early teens. The sheer real estate of my nose was quite outstanding. My nose had grown disproportionately larger than anything on an average human face. My snoot seemed to develop and mature faster than the rest of me. By grade 7, I was a skinny 12-year-old with the body of a boy, but with the beak of a man. It was a significant one. It was an industrial-sized nose. It was a nose that could house its own little factory. And the big beak combined with the brown skin made me look more ethnic. There was no getting around it. Throw in my odd name and the pistachios in my lunch bag. And it was hard to make the case that I was another white kid like my friend Davy Franklin or that Chris from across the street. But my mother kept on telling me I was the same as everyone else. It became increasingly hard to suggest somehow that I wasn't Iranian. But after the revolution, it was also hard to tell people that I was Iranian. It was a trap. My parents became very quiet about our background in public. This was true of many in the Iranian diaspora. In fact, many Iranians started to call themselves Persian to avoid being connected to the backward regime of old bearded men in power in their former homeland. Sometimes I would use the word Persian, and I could tell that a person who knew nothing about the cultural origins of Iran would think I had said Parisian. Parisian would mean I was from Paris. I didn't bother to correct them. I hoped that they would think I was French. My first name already sounded French-ish, and it was better to be thought to have come from France than Iran, and technically, they decided that without me having to lie. My desire for denial ran deep. Sometimes I would even hurt the feelings of others to save myself from ridicule. There was another kid in my grade named Ibrahim. He was a Muslim from Africa. We were friends, but I distanced myself from him when people asked if we had the same religious background. He had darker skin and sometimes got teased. I would abandon him to protect my own interests. It was shameful, but I lived with the hope that no one would find out I was Iranian. My family collectively got its Canadian citizenship in a sweet ceremony in 1978. We had all studied hard and we'd aced the questions. It was a great day for us. My father was now able to tell people he was Canadian. He would thereafter maintain a tremendous pride in choosing to live in Canada and called himself a proud Canadian citizen. But there was no mistaking he was an immigrant with an accent that originated somewhere else. And no matter how hard they tried, my parents couldn't will me to look whiter than I was. Here's the thing you need to know about Iranians. Many Iranians like to think they're white. This is because some of them are, or at least they're almost white. And they certainly fancy themselves that way. And to be technically correct, Persians are actually members of the Aryan race. They are not Semites. You may be surprised to learn that I come from an Aryan race. Stop laughing. It's the truth. As you know, Aryan usually implies white in the popular imagination, and Iranians like that. That's why Persians will often make a point of identifying themselves this way. No, listen, we are not Arab, we are Aryan, some will say. You will hear Persians saying this or something like it. They will insist on telling you they're Aryan. There's even a popular music group in Iran named Aryan. That's Aryan spelt slightly differently, in case you didn't catch it. And on top of that, Persians have always had a predilection for things Western. In the 1980s, most Iranians loved the United States and its people. It was great irony that Iranians were often depicted as anti-Western because there was so much affection in Iran for the West and an interest in the trappings of modern American culture. Being considered white meant being more Western, and middle-class Iranians liked that. But I didn't know the historical background to all this in 1982. I didn't even know what Aryan meant. I just knew my mother wanted me to consider myself white. There's a problem with Iranians insisting on being considered fair-skinned. The problem is that many Iranians are brown. It's a nice shade of olive brown for the most part. Some are a little browner than others, but very few are very white. They just want to be. At least they did back in the 1980s. So to put this in some context, while most of the world population was going out of its way to bake in the sun and become browner in the 1980s, Iranians wanted to be whiter. This was always an issue for me at home. My friends would aspire to a suntan. They would consider a tanned look to be sexy and healthy. Everyone wanted brown skin unless they were goths or really new wave or aspiring to be really new wave. Even my grade 5 girlfriend, Dana Werner, who had kissed me twice and then broken up with me, liked to go tanning. And that was when she was 10. Some preppy people liked to tan so much in the 1980s that they started going to salons with electronic caskets that they would lie in so they could become browner. Being brown was so important that people would risk zapping themselves in caskets. But this did not happen amongst the ranks of my family. My mother always wanted me to avoid the sun. She would get very angry if I spent too much time outdoors in the summer. Why do you insist on going in the sun like this? Why? You're going to be black. That's what my mother would often say. Often. Vai is an alarmist Farsi expression meaning, oh dear. I'm not sure if my mother really thought I would become black. I think this is a bit of an exaggeration. I could never really be black, but that's the way my mother talks sometimes. This was her form of protection speak. For instance, she said something similar when any member of the family went outside in the winter without a proper heavy coat on. My mother would say, Birun locht naro. This translates to don't go outside naked. Again, this statement may appear excessive. It seems odd to accuse a fully clothed human of being naked. But this was my mother's code for put on a winter coat. And in the same way, my mother said, you're going to be black. She actually meant, don't get too much of a tan because then you will be even more brown and you will stand out more and everyone will know you are ethnic and you will be made fun of and you will be sad, or more specifically, I will be sad. My mother was trying to protect me, and she could say a lot in a few words. Here's a short list of things my mother would not want me to be in 1982. Noisy, ethnic, punk, naked, late, non-white. As you can see, my mother worried about many of the potential ways I might acquit myself when I was 14. For example, as I've noted, she did not want me to leave the house naked, but I could control that. I could put on a winter coat if I had to. Unfortunately for my mother, I couldn't control the final item on the list. No matter how many ways my mother tried to deny this reality, I wasn't totally white. I've always had a brownish tint to my skin, and this is why I was called Blackie in England, and this is why I couldn't properly be New Wave, and this is why it was so hard to look like Bowie. Bowie almost never had a tan. He was pale, super pale. So was Wendy, and so were the goths that listened to Bauhaus, and so were the members of Duran Duran.
That's great stuff, man.
Thank you.
Again, I think what's great about it is that we all, the whole thing with Khomeini not sitting, that was hilarious, with a chair. What do Muslims have against chair? I don't know. I mean, that was, and I think Duran, if they were Iranian, they'd be called Tehran. No, again, I think it's great because you're expressing your story and we can relate to it so well. And I know that we're gonna go to questions here in a minute. But before we do, I just want to ask you, and I don't know, you might get this question a lot, but like, you now are a successful interviewer. You interviewed Dustin Hoffman recently, which was cool as hell. And one question I just have is, who do you have an interview that you remember? Like, what was one of, like, because here's this kid, this kid that doesn't fit in, and now here's this grown man who's interviewing Dustin friggin' Hoffman. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's a huge success story, and so I'm sure it's not in the book, but maybe there's a story of an interview that you did that either you were pinching yourself, or it was something interesting that you were just.
Well, I don't. I get to do so many interviews, and usually I can't even remember them. I just remember the week that I just did. Like 2 days ago, I had Kenny Rogers and the country singer, and that was I really loved that interview. It was a very candid interview, and I did Schwarzenegger a few days ago, which was just weird. Arnold Schwarzenegger, because I had to do the interview with, like, he had bodyguards around him. First of all, like, he needs bodyguards, but he had all these people who still call him the governor around him, and I was trying to ask him critical questions, and I could tell they were all getting upset, and it was it'll play this week, but it was interesting. There's a lot of interviews that I love. I love the time I interviewed you, and I think you've been on the show 3 times.
I had my bodyguards too.
Yeah.
They were just invisible.
Yeah. They're bearded guys with turbans. Yeah.
Yeah. But they wouldn't sit on a chair.
Yeah. They're all sitting on the ground eating patty. Yeah. And by the way, I know it's probably ignorant of, Islam and stuff, but I really didn't, growing up, I didn't know stuff like, why are they sitting on the ground? I mean, I didn't understand, it seemed so crazy to me. But I don't know if there's anything wrong with sitting on the ground.
It was okay.
Yeah.
It's all right.
What I was going to say to your question, though, is I don't want to be disrespectful to those who believe that I'm successful and I'm doing well. And I really appreciate people who say that to me and who are so generous with saying, especially a lot of the kind of people in this room who say we're proud of you and stuff. It means a lot to me. But I don't totally feel that way. I don't feel like I'm a big success. I feel like I'm a guy who's just working hard. And what I was going to say is, I don't think that, and I think this is probably true for some people in this room, especially people our age who've come to the West and stuff, you don't, that experience, that first generation experience, that immigrant experience, it never leaves you. It's not like no amount of success or money or whatever or fame is going to make me forget, where I come from and the difficult times and the good times and all that. That's all part of me, and I carry that in my psyche. And the work to be done is to try and come to terms with what it all meant and try to make sense of it. And this book is part of that, and try and share the stories with others who might be feeling that similar way. But it's never black and white in the sense that, I had it tough then, and now I'm great. It's it's
not at all.
I still suffer from the same stuff. I mean, as I still go, there'll still be rooms that I walk into and kind of go, am I fully accepted here? These people are from ancestors who've been here for hundreds of years. Will they, do they consider me part of them or not, right?
Yeah, you still feel an outsider to an extent, but I'm saying, I mean, obviously, and like you said, there's obviously a lot. We were talking about this earlier that a lot of immigrants come here and they work hard and they're successful in their own fields. And I don't think a lot of people we get so caught up in the work, and we love doing the work, that we don't reflect on like where we were and where we are. So the question was more, we were getting this peek into this child who was such an outsider in his head and surrounded by, not fitting in. And I'm guessing back then you never would have thought that you would have, that you'd be doing. I mean, and I'm not saying that you pat yourself on the back and go, I am Jian Ghomeshi, and CBC. I talked to Dustin Hoffman, and you're not that person. And it's not about that. It's more about like.
Well, what about you?
How cool is it?
What about
I'm saying.
you?
How cool is it?
Do you, when you're an Iranian guy?
This guy cannot stop asking questions.
No.
Baba, it's my turn to interview you.
No, but when you're doing your gig, and you're doing it at the Laugh Factory in Los Angeles, and you're doing it to a non-Iranian audience, or when you're doing it in Dubai, for that matter, it's still part of you, right? Feeling like a minority in
absolutely
in
no
America.
I mean look, I walk into, I mean, this happened recently, like in LA. We just we went into like this country club because my son goes to this school where, like, we're the few people that I feel are of any color, and we went to and there was like an event at a country club, and my wife's Indian, and we walked in, both of us were like they look at the pictures on the walls, and we're like, there's not a single, like you were saying, tan person in the picture, and they're all like, yachting outfits, and and even though they weren't, I don't think they were looking at us. We felt like, I think we're being looked at, but I don't think they were. I don't think they were. Maybe they were. Who's that?
Were you invited back?
Huh?
Were you invited back?
No, I divorced my wife and went back with a white girl. That's how you got to do it, Gian. No, they were really nice. They were super nice, and I think some of it is obviously you have the jerks, the guy whose name you protected, which, by the way, you should, Jim. But I think some of it is also, it gets so much. You're right. We're bombarded with, the images of the hostages and Khomeini and even today, like Ahmadinejad, and then the protests and this and that. Sometimes you understand, we both know the whole thing you said about the Persian thing, or how many friends did you have that became Italian? I mean, we understand that. But what's great about what I'm saying is, first of all, I think it's great that it's a lot easier to say I'm gonna write a book than to write a book. Just so you know, I know a lot of people here again are going like, well, I'm gonna write my own. These guys, what are these guys talking about, man? The story I have, this story. So it's a lot easier to say it than to do it. You did it.
A lot of people in this room, like my father, like my great parents, should write their story, because there's incredible stories of people coming here. These are pioneers, I think, right?
No, I agree. I'm saying there's a lot of great stories. I'm saying that.
Why do you hate the people in this room?
Because they won't let me sign your book. No, I was saying that that I agree. That's every time I talk to any friend of mine that's come from another country, the stories are ridiculous. Okay, I mean, like, I have so many friends that had to sneak over the mountains of Afghanistan. I'm serious, like, and like just sneak out. And I'm like, I came first class on Pan Am. It was the meal was a little too hot, but. So yeah, I mean, there's great stories. What I'm saying, though, is the execution of it, which you did, and the execution of where you are now. So that's pretty cool.
Let me ask you something. When you do your gigs, go ahead.
This guy, Aghay Tabrizi, please don't invite them back anymore. No.
When you do, because I know you're very popular in some of the Arab countries.
Yeah.
When you do your gig there, you do your set. Do they see you as Iranian, or do they see you as one of them?
You know what? I think that
you do the Axis of Evil.
Yeah. I think one of the things that made it, like you said, the Chinese girl who writes you from Montreal. I think immigrants and people from other parts of the world, we all have so many similar experiences that that they do feel like we have that in common. So it is. They see, oh, you're the Iranian guy, but you're one of us. You know what I'm saying? And the same thing with what you've done. And so, I think what's great is the reason I was asking you if you ever pinch yourself, and I'm sure you're so focused on the work. You're like, oh, Dustin Hoffman's coming in. I got to ask the right questions, right? But it is pretty cool that this guy, because a lot of, and we all have like kids at this age, they don't know what they want to do, and you're insecure, and Like you said, the nose grows and the.
Well, I will tell you this: when you, if you allow me then to be tediously immodest, when the book goes #1, it means a lot of people are buying the book across the country, thousands of people. That most of them aren't Iranian. I mean, not to say that Iranians don't.
The Iranians are buying one and photocopying, and then. Yeah. I feel your pain. I've sold one DVD in 20 years. It's okay. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
They actually don't even buy the one. They ask for a copy.
Yeah.
If you have an extra copy.
No, but you were saying, I'm sorry. So
no,
that,
I was just saying that as I was reading that story about what it was like to go to be an Iranian after the revolution, I do take pride in the fact that there's some kid in St. John's, Newfoundland right now, and some woman in Lethbridge, and some elderly gentleman in Prince George, British Columbia, reading that story about us right now.
Yeah.
That makes me proud.
That's awesome.
Because just that story will hopefully go a ways in terms of humanizing what we're about.
Absolutely.
Which is terrorists.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to come out there and sign. Please thanks to Maz Jobrani again for coming.
You guys, one more time for Jian Ghomeshi. Please come join outside. He's going to be signing the books. And then if you walk down the hall, I'll sign his books. Just don't tell. Thank you again for Paria, too. Please give it up for Paria Foundation for organizing this, Mr. Tabrizi. Thank you all. Good night.